with the weather forecast to be like this for the next week or so, I'm not going to be able to work on alumina, and with the big boat up in traction still, can't even do a little fishing trip on that either. So like it or not, we're going to be doing a little bit of lure making. So for those of you who are wondering, no, I haven't had an opportunity to actually water test that J plug. I'm really looking forward to doing it, but until I have a boat that's actually running, I won't be able to do it. But if you're following the community section of the YouTube channel, then you'll know when I do it, because I'll announce it there and I'll tell you where to go to see the video footage. Today's build is going to be a lure that is probably, in my opinion, and this is going to hurt some people's feelings, one of the ugliest lures ever made. At least the model that I'm going to do. The Heddon Magnum Torpedo. The paint job is horrendous. The irony is that it's one of the most valuable vintage collectible lures out there. This thing can range from the few $100s all the way up to $1,500, $2,000, and even $3,000. And the most valuable is the one with the yellow in the belly, the red head, the odd scale pattern on the very top, and then the really unattractive sparkle flecks that are sort of halfway embedded in the finish. It's not my favorite, and I don't think I've ever owned one, maybe a small one, but I think I'm going to get a kick out of making a counterfeit version of a lure that ranges up into the $3,000 range. So there you go. Super simple, slightly ugly, but I suppose it caught fish in its day, and it probably still does. These things are still in production. They're made out of plastic now. There's no rattle in it. There's a propeller at the end if you don't know what that is. And if you've never seen one or used one, it is a topwater lure meant to be pulled slowly. That propeller creates that disturbance, a little bit of noise on the surface, and leaves a real bubble trail like almost anything else with a propeller. And the Magnum size is the valuable size, and that's where we're going to build. And it's 3 5/16 inches long. Its thickest part is just under 7/8 of an inch, 0.828 inches. And the key elements in the design are where this taper begins, right at 7/8 of an inch from the end. It's how long this red section of the head is, 17/16 of an inch, just a little more than an inch. There's no pretty way to draw this thing. And of course, that torpedo shape means we're going to make it on the lathe. That's how those were made back in the day. So we're going to go ahead and grab a piece of maple out of my stock and see if we can't shape that thing just like that. So that's got a pretty heavy wobble in it. So it's going to take me a little time to get this so it's nice and true. And hopefully there's enough meat here that we'll still have somewhere around 7/8 of an inch of dowel left. Now the smart thing to do would be to start with a 1-inch dowel, but I don't have one, so we're stuck with this. All right, I'm gonna get this thing down to about an inch. We still got a little ways to go, so we're gonna have plenty of wood. And the wood looks really nice and clean, so I really like this maple. And I'll get back to you when we have a nice 1-inch dowel. All right, we got our inch all the way. We'll still need to take off another 1/8 of an inch, but I'll do that after I've got the shape sort of roughed in. All right, I've changed out to the smaller tool guide so it fits in here. And I've done a very rough sketch of the half body drawing. So this is half the body. And the key points on this one, it's so simple. Just the ends and the point where the taper begins at the tail. So let's get started on this actual shape. Alright, now I've set the calipers at 7/8, and this is just about right. And that means I can go at it with some sandpaper and get it to precisely where we need it to be. And I think I can start off with 120 and get a pretty good finish on this thing. All right, that feels really good. All I got to do is cut through that little tiny nub and through the tail section, and we'll have this thing off here. And I like cutting it off from the stock with the bandsaw. Less of a chance of this thing flying off of here. All right, I've sanded down and smoothed out the end cut on both ends, and I've put a little crosshair where I want to drill, where I want to install the tie-on eye and the tail hook hanger. The belly hook hardware won't go in until the very end after I'm done painting and we've got it all clear coated. Right. This isn't really accurate. There's no real twist eye here or little standard hook eye. The belly hook actually hangs from a little contraption that screws into the body, and then the hook hangs from a little hole in it. And if you've never seen one of these things, it looks like a little tiny miniature sugar scoop. It's a really very old school way of doing it. I'm going to go ahead and wipe it down with some alcohol and we're ready to start painting. I always forget how hard maple is. So it must have like a really good hardness to weight ratio. So we're going to start off with some of the Testors Aztec opaque white, and I'm going to give it at least 2, maybe 3 coats. Get it nice and opaque, and then we'll see what we do with the rest of this sort of very weird and haphazard paint job they put on this thing. Alright, so I've just painted the belly yellow. And I didn't have the camera on, I apologize. But I'm using this Comart yellow because it's a little more antique-y. It's got a little orange in it. It doesn't look quite as lemony yellow as the Testors does. At this point, I'm establishing the bottom, right? Because there was no bottom. So, and I wanted to make sure that I don't drift the paint up the sides. And I did that just by painting across and out towards the bottom. And I'm guiding myself by looking at the photographs I have. And if you look at the very top, it's got a couple of colors. It's dark gray that fades off. It's got a darker color underneath the scale pattern. Scale pattern's a kind of a medium silver. But I think the white on the side looks a little pearlescent to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and shoot it with some pearlized white. See if we can get that old-timey look on it. Alright, I think that was a good choice. Now the trick to painting the top is to identifying the top, right? So I know we've got the bottom is yellow, so I'm gonna take a look at this thing and make sure that the yellow is straight down and the very top is 180 degrees from the yellow. And for that dark misty gray, I'm gonna go with this transparent from Badger Paint. It's called Ghost Tint Oil Discharge. Anything with discharge has to be good, right? Alright, that's got a nice drift to it on the sides. It's kind of what I was looking for. Paint wanted to fisheye on me on the top there. Good thing I've got to cover it with black anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry. And then I'm going to put a black stripe down the middle, trying to be careful not to drift it too far. Then we'll come back with the silver scale. Alright, so I'm going to set up for the silver scales on top. Just a really thin line of kind of big scales. And I'll use this golden iridescent silver. Alright, hopefully I didn't do too much. About right. Alright, so now I've got a nice fresh piece of this stuff that has never had paint on it. We'll be putting down a smaller scale pattern in a sort of bronze gold shade. So we're going to go with the pearlized, not the metallic. Let's see what it looks like. All right. So the next step is going to be to let all this paint dry. And then we got to paint the red head. Then we'll be ready to give it the first clear coat with a bunch of sparkles in it. But that'll have to wait till this dries overnight. Well, it's another drizzly day. So let's get some more lights on in this place and get back to work on that lure. Alright, the paint is certainly dry, and the next thing I want to do is mask off the front that's going to get painted like a really good, bright, opaque red. And to do that, I just made a little roll of construction paper and taped it while it was around it before I had the paint on it. So I'm going to put a little imperceptible, nearly imperceptible little line so I know how far forward to bring this little masking tube. And I'm going to use this Tester's paint. It just has that kind of old-timey look. No pearlescence, no fancy undertones, just straight up red. Alright, we'll call that the first coat. I'll give that a little time to dry and we'll give it another coat. Alright, I think that has it. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to stick this in the little oven to dry so we can move this thing along a little faster. Alright, so while we're waiting for that to dry, I need to figure out a way to match the white of the eye. And it's not really white. There's a very subtle yellow to it. So I'm going to go ahead and mix a little paint, see if we can get close. So what I'm going to do is start out with some white. I'm going to need very little, but to mix you got to have a little extra, so there's a little bit of waste. And I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow with it. And I'm going to try to get the most insignificant amount of paint on this little tiny wire. See if I can get a little bit of yellowing in the paint. That's actually working. Might have done the trick. I think we need a little tiny bit more yellow. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a tiny, tiny bit. I think that's got it. Let's see if we can do a little side-by-side comparison. Alright, so that is our straight up white. And let's put a little drop of this slightly yellowed. So subtle. Not sure the camera is going to pick it up. But it's a little more like a bone color. Alright, so now I need to know the size of the eye. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and just scale it off. Since I know that the lure is 0.828 inches thick, I can calculate the ratio from the scale of this photograph. So the width of it on the photo is 1 5/8, which is 1.625, and we'll divide that by the actual thickness of the lure, 0.828, and we get our ratio, which is 1.96 to 1. So now we measure the eye, the white part of the eye, and we get 9/16, which is 0.5625. And we divide that by our ratio, which is 1.96, and we get 0.287, which is about 9/32. Now I just go into my drill index, grab the 9/32, and we can drill a hole for that eye. And I'm going to do the same thing for the pupil too. Alright, so now I'm taking a piece of this really thin, flexible clear plastic that I got just out of some packaging somewhere, and I cut a little strip of it. And now I'm going to drill the holes for both the pupil and the outside of the eye through this plastic and use this as my template to paint. And to get a really nice clean hole, I'm going to clamp it between two pieces of wood. And clamp it down nice and firm. Alright, and I'm just going to drill the two holes as far apart as reasonable. Just want to make sure I go through both pieces of wood. And the hole for the pupil is almost exactly 1/8 of an inch. Let's take a look at how they came out. Alright. Hopefully you can see that. Nice crisp edges should create a nice circle. Alright, we got that done just in time to get this out. It's looking pretty good. I mean, considering. Let's go back to the paint booth and get these eyes painted on. Using this photograph, I did the same thing, scaling off the location of the eyes. And I put 2 dots where the center of the eyes need to be. But before I paint on the eyes, I want to go ahead and prep it for a clear coat. I want to put an initial clear coat on it for a couple of reasons. First, I got to get those ugly metal flecks in there, and I want to embed them in that first clear coat. And I want to paint the eyes over a clear coat because the clear coat will fill in all those irregularities from the wood, you know, a little bit of a texture, and trying to paint a perfect circle on texture doesn't work very well. You end up with a lot of bleed through. So I'm going to put a mid coat of the polyacrylic just to seal the paint, and then we'll clear coat it. Now it's just a matter of giving it a nice thin coat. I don't want too much on there. I just want enough so I'll get a nice coating and be able to stick the sparkles on this thing. As much as the idea of putting sparkles on a lure like this kind of gives me gags, but hey, everybody's got their taste. And I'm going to try to sprinkle them on. I don't want them anywhere on the head, so I'm just going to start here at the tail, get down close. I think that looks pretty good. Alright, that's some disco looking thing. Let's go ahead and put this thing in the turner. And let's get it turning. I'm going to let it go for a little while, then we'll turn the lights on. Alright, it's been an hour or so. Alright, that's a halfway decent first coat. Alright, let's go ahead and paint those eyes on there. Use our nice cream color paint. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, now we'll dry these guys and put the pupils on. And I'll put a little mark where I think the center is so I can try to center the pupil. That should do it. Doesn't look too bad. Alright, just so that nobody thinks that I'm actually trying to commit fraud here, I'll go ahead and put the Engineered Angler logo on here. And there you go. EA. Alright, let's really goop in a good heavy coat for this last coat. I want to try to cover up as much of these sparkles as possible. It just rubs me the wrong way to see those things sticking out of the paint job. Alright, when it's on this thick, I definitely want to turn it for a while before I turn on the light. That'll give it a chance to really even out and even to get a lot of the bubbles out too. Check it out, we got sunshine, finally. That means maybe we can get some water shots of this thing in the sun. Let's see what it looks like. Now, I gave it a couple hours in the chamber last night to get the initial set, and then this morning I came in, turned it back on, and let it go for another couple hours. So I wanted to be sure that thick coat was fully set. And I really do think it looks pretty doggone nice. And the sparkles stick out of the finish just like the original. I'll go ahead and take off the temporary hardware on the ends, and then we'll go ahead and do the final assembly. That ought to be fun. We got a propeller and everything to put on. Get it off the hanger. And I'm just going to cut the clear coat at the base so it'll come out without chipping the finish. We'll even it out a little bit, do the same to the front. Now, first thing I want to do is put the little hook hanger hardware for the belly. And I'm going to align that thing by looking at the eyes and finding the center between the eyes and trying to get directly across from there. I'll draw a little line there, and that will come off with a little bit of alcohol. Now, the screws for these things are truly miniature. They're about 1/4 inch long and about 2 millimeters in diameter. So I need a really small bit too, and this one should do it. It's 0.6 inches. So I'll leave a little bit for the threads to bite into, but not so much that I have a hard time kind of driving these little things. And I'm just going to temporarily place this, and then I line it up and make another mark. Clean the marks off, and then we just take this little jeweler's screwdriver and get this thing in there. Now, before we put the other screw in, we've got to have a hook in it, and it takes a number 2 hook without a split ring. That was the traditional way to actually set this thing up, so that's the way we're going to do it. And now we can screw the whole thing down nice and firmly. To say I would have preferred to have a split ring on there, but tradition is tradition. Alright, now we'll put the front one on, and you can see these things are 1 1/4 inches. Get that nicely aligned. Now it's just a matter of installing the tail spinner assembly. And that's going to include a hook, a screw and eye with an open eye, because the hook goes on without a split ring. This is something the original didn't have, but you know what? There's an engineer on the job, so I need to have a nylon friction bearing. Then the propeller goes on, and after the propeller is this little fairing cup that fairs the eye on the little screw and eye. So first thing we do is mount the hook on this eye, and then just close the eye around the hook. And I like to tweak it down a little bit extra so there's not much of a gap, even though that cup is going to protect that gap. The next thing is the little cup, and I'll just run that down there. There you go, the propeller and my little friction pad there. And that should do it. Now we just screw this thing on there, and I think we can zip this in and then finish it off by hand so we don't overdo it. Pretty cool. I think we're ready for the water. Finally some sunshine. We've had like 6 or 8 days of just drizzle, overcast, and raining. All right, let's see how this thing looks in the water. All right, let's give it a cast out here by the lily pad. Certainly makes bubbles. Kind of fun to see an old school lure just sort of in action and burbling on top of the water. So with that, I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I probably won't post for a week or two with the holiday coming and holiday travel and all. So enjoy the holiday, and for those of you not in the United States, always a good day to just be thankful. And if you can, give to somebody who has less to be thankful for. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.